Hi everyone, you're on the News Pulse channel. Having finished one war, mankind invariably begins to prepare for the next one, not because of any particular cynicism or cruelty, or the ambition of individual leaders. It's just that no end to a war can satisfy everyone involved. Any peace is a compromise, where the victor agrees to give up some of his demands in order to secure what he has already gained. The Cold War elevated the art of compromise to an entirely new level, primarily because the alternative was nuclear Armageddon, something no one desired. The last Cold War has ended, yet another one is now commencing. It can be stated that despite all the progress, peaceful aspirations, discussions and assurances, Washington has officially initiated and commenced the Second Cold War with Russia. Center for a New American Security. The Center for a New American Security released a report that began to shape the ideology of a new Cold War. A technical overview that lists Russia as the main antagonist, as the USSR once was. The stated goal is to change Russia from within, to weaken it. To do this, the center's employees have identified 10 vulnerabilities that are supposed to be used against us in the game of long. Russia's defense industry. Strike through sanctions. Let the factories continue to work, but more expensive, slower, and with worse results. The goal is to disrupt the pace of production and development. Arms exports. Customer pressure. The US will prevent countries from buying Russian weapons by offering alternatives or threats of sanctions. Technology and cybersphere. Walk away from any technological ties with Russia, tighten export controls. Interfere with Rosatom and other entities that develop electronics and chips. Financial sector. Seek and freeze the assets of the central bank and the US National Security Fund, already paralyzed $300 billion. The plan is to finally cut off Russia's access to reserves and the global financial system. Oil and gas. Persuade the EU to ban the purchase of Russian gas permanently, so that investments will go in other directions and there will be no return to Russia. Ukraine. Help the Ukrainian armed forces get weapons capable of hitting military targets deep inside Russia. Bluntly stated, this is needed to offset Russia's advantage on the front, Asia and the Caucasus. Support alliances in the region excluding the Russian Federation. Encourage former allies to distance from Moscow. Use diplomacy. Advocate for decisions in the UN and other bodies without Russia. Prevent Russians from holding key roles in international organizations. Focus on public opinion and internal stability. Utilize Telegram and YouTube for influence. Run an information campaign, including Russian-speaking immigrants. Russian specialists abroad. Support the immigration of brains from Russia like engineers, IT specialists and scientists. Focus on not just accepting them, but integrating them into the West. So, there's a very ambitious plan ahead, if the journalists translated the documents correctly. First, note that this plan is feasible and can be executed. In 1945, the USSR and USA were closely matched in military-industrial complex levels. The Second World War warmed up industry. However, the USSR began to lag behind America rather quickly, so much so that ideologically they had to proclaim not the thesis of building communism or socialism, but the thesis of catching up and overtaking Washington. The problem of the then Soviet Union was in fact socialism, which closed the country from the world market, but failed to provide people with the closure of basic needs, because of which ordinary life became lame, and gum jeans became attractive. Western experts in their assessments proceed from the fact that modern Russia and the then USSR are similar. They assume that America will be able to force Russia to shut down, turn on its mobilization economy, and die. Curiously, the masses of turbo-patriots of all possible shades demand from the state exactly this. It is important not to give in. Otherwise, the voiced plan is realistic, but it does not take into account the place and role of modern Russia in the global division of labor and the realities of the modern Russian economy. The first and most basic thing is food security. You can build tens of thousands of tanks, but tankers and their families want to eat. Not just to eat, but to eat well and nourishingly. Therefore, if the state cannot provide a well-fed life in the rear, then no tanks will make sense. People will find themselves with absolutely nothing to defend, and they will lack the physical strength necessary for any kind of defense. Moreover, our exports of food are a significant guarantee that ensures an open market for our country. Consequently, any efforts to isolate Russia will inevitably face the challenge of dealing with the needs of those who seek isolation. Energy resources, food supplies, and fertilizers are all fundamental assets crucial for thriving economic development in the 21st century. Russia is fortunate to possess these essential assets. We are already actively leveraging these resources to bring other states into the systems we have established, such as BRICS or the Eurasian Union. Economic Union, thus keeping the doors open. We can't compel our allies to abandon us. The market, yet again, proves more stable than any political declarations. Regarding the Russian Federation's counteractions in all areas, the US can and will intervene in everything, including Rosatom. However, we must understand that by stopping a Russian company from operating, Washington needs to provide an alternative. Otherwise, the interference will soon become ineffective and merely an annoyance, not a barrier. Concerning political confrontation, it's important to note that Washington is under the illusion of a single world order that once was. This leads to attempts to isolate Moscow, impose financial sanctions, and disrupt Russia's alliances in the Caucasus and other regions. There's an effort to cut Moscow off from the global financial system. The irony is that the global financial system no longer exists as it once did. There are remnants of that system, but no more. BRICS is quite close to creating a full-fledged analog, but without the flaws of the dollar system. In general, the break is that no one wants to simply exchange dollars for real, yuan or ruble, and thereby repeat the past stage. Therefore, discussion and formation of a system, where the dictate of the dollar would not be possible, as it is now, requires time. Countries use this time for transition to the new system and harmonization of their economies with both systems at once. BRICS is not the whole world yet, and neither is the collective West. There are hundreds of countries hanging out in the middle that don't get anywhere, but this mass of people take numbers. It is stupid for them to abandon the dollar and rush into a new maelstrom, but it is just as stupid for them to sit on the dollar alone. That is why they harmonize their systems so that they can use both. Washington will have nothing and no one to threaten. Angola, Mozambique, or any other country. Well. This situation disrupts all of the United States' plans to remove Russians from leadership roles. Perhaps some federation might choose a Frenchman to lead, but what's the point if there are multiple federations? Russia leads in numerous areas, and without a leader in federation competitions and other conferences, they simply lose their significance. Overall, this topic is too broad to be covered in just one issue, so let's summarize based on the information presented. First, the US has chosen to go to war with Russia, and this decision stands regardless of the NWO outcome. A Palichinelle-level surprise indeed, but not unexpected. We knew it and were ready. Second, it's clear Washington aims to replicate its Cold War success. The issue is that the world in 1945, when the Iron Curtain fell, and the world in 2025 as it falls again, are not the same. The USSR and the USA lived within two ideological, political, and economic systems. There was a struggle between the systems, which ended with the triumph of market relations. We can tell a lot of stories that we were deceived, and in general, Russia did not lose that war but tried to negotiate. The fact remains, the market proved its advantages. Socialism could not do it. Now there are no two systems in the Second Cold War. There is only one system, the market system. We're discussing fighting within the same system, and this is a key difference. No one has a systemic edge over the enemy, so the rules are fair. The result of this conflict hinges on who grasps Adam Smith and Machiavelli better, on who stays grounded rather than lost in ideological fantasies. The US is ideologically blind. The gerontocracy should have seen an eye doctor long ago to understand that Russia is Russia, and it's futile to wage war against it. We still have the USSR, or at best Russia of the 92nd model, when Bush's legs were asked at the White House. We realize how stupid it is, but they stubbornly do not want to see it. In part, though, we should draw our own conclusions. At least to answer the question, why did we sit quieter than water and lower than grass all through the 90 years and the noughties? And in 2014 we limited ourselves to Crimea. Russia needed to change. While we changed, the US rested on its laurels. Time passed, and the laurels vanished. What's left are plans for another Cold War. These plans fit the Russia of the 90s, not modern Russia. Still, they deserve attention to catch when they realize the reality. That's when the West will seek peace to change and return with a new war. This is how humanity lives.